Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Microsoft Academic Research Exchange. I'm Marcy Collinson, Director of Worldwide Academic Research at Microsoft. In this event, Stephen Duggan, VP International at Terawe, and Ian Lum, Senior Product Manager for Terawe, will walk through a live demo and share real-world case studies that show how leading institutions are using ManageX to accelerate research timelines, reduce infrastructure burden, and enhance researcher autonomy, all while working within institutional IT policies and budgets. If you have questions, you're welcome to submit them anytime during the presentation using the live meeting chat. Stephen and Ian, please take it away.
Thank you, Marcy. And hello, everybody. My name is Stephen Duggan. I'm Vice President International for Terawe. We're a experienced Microsoft partner. We're coming here to talk to you today about our ManageX offering for academic research. And joining me is Ian Lum. Ian is our Senior Product Manager here at Terawe. So a quick introduction to Terawe. I'm sure the name is familiar to some of you, but not many. We've been in operation since 2013, and we are a cross-industry partner. We provide services into all of public sector, including education and healthcare, and into commercial industries such as energy, transportation, manufacturing as well. We're a global partner with, I'm speaking to you today from our offices in Dublin and Ireland. Ian is speaking to you from our office in Seattle. And our leadership team are all ex-Microsoft people. You know, from my own background, I spent over 20 years in Microsoft, originally running the education business for Ireland. I then ran the Western Europe education business and spent 5 years in the corporate headquarters in Redmond as Director of Worldwide Education Strategy. We've been providing services and solutions based on Microsoft technology for a long time. And we've got a unique blend, we'd like to think, of both deep expertise right across those industries, but also in the core technologies. So we like to think we supplement our subject matter expertise in those industries with deep technical expertise as well. And we're also a strategic Microsoft partner for digital app innovation and modernization. So see us, as it says at the bottom of the slide, as more than just a vendor or partner. We want to be the technology partner for you for cloud and AI transformation. But today's focus is all about specifically academic research. And what we're very conscious of, and particularly with the breadth of customers we have in this area across the globe, that there are some significant challenges for research in research computing. First of all is making the money stretch, optimizing budget across research projects. Secondly, making sure that the technology is helping researchers get to results as quickly as possible. Within that, the challenge, and obviously Microsoft technology is ideal for helping to maintain this, is maintaining productivity throughout those research projects. Beyond that, supporting multidisciplinary collaboration, allowing people across different projects, locations, and teams to work closely and effectively together. At the back of this, always the realization that data security and geofencing is absolutely paramount. You know, we're dealing in cases of things like healthcare research, which I'll mention a little later, with sensitive data, which might include patient data. So having core data security safeguards is really important. And then obviously beyond that, providing instant access to platforms so people can quickly get up and running and do the things as researchers that they need to do. So when we first came into this space, one of the things that struck us straight away is that effectively there is a difficulty gap. You know, on the one side, we have a huge diversity of different cloud solutions, and that environment is changing all of the time. And at the other extreme, we've got expanding research initiatives, looking at new challenges to try and rise to that. And in the middle, there's often a difficulty for researchers to, you know, in terms of determining where to start and how best to work. The whole purpose of ManageX is to try and enable researchers to optimize productivity, effectively to narrow that gap by making sure that we're helping to provide those researchers with the very best of what the cloud offers without their having to become experts in IT. At this stage, we're going to pause and I'm going to hand it over to Ian. Ian's now going to share his screen.
Thanks, Stephen. As you were very aptly pointing out, there really is this very significant difficulty gap, and ManageX is our solution from Terawe that aims to close that gap for researchers. We do focus on cloud enablement and cloud-based platforms, but it's very important to convey that the reach of ManageX extends not only for various hybrid configurations, but even out to the edge. And so we're able to provide a variety of different solutions for researchers, whether they are more academically oriented or even those parts of research organizations that exist within the private sector. As you're going to be seeing, one of the key aspects of what allows us to deliver this solution is the notion of what we call blueprints. These blueprints are basically templates that capture all of the specifics, all of the nuances of a research use case, and they allow us to, in a very nice, repeatable fashion, to automate the provisioning and the deployment of these various scenarios. Once we make use of these blueprints, once we use them in practice, we develop for researchers and researchers what we refer to as workspaces. And so you'll be seeing more examples of all of this. And when you put it all together, we're able to enable not only simple standalone applications, but entire workflows, complex workflows that may have very specific requirements around security, compliance, and so forth. So we really are able to digitally transform research. We are able to help enable people be more productive in a sense, gain various efficiencies, get to research results faster. And so it's all about helping researchers be much more agile, not having to be encumbered with having to focus on all of the details of IT infrastructure. We're able to deliver optimized solutions, as that can be very critical in certain contexts. And another great strength of adopting the ManageX platform on Azure is the sustainability advantages that we're also able to offer. Researchers care a lot about managing costs, and so that's also a key benefit of the platform. And as I was mentioning before, we're not just about focused on the cloud. We're really able to span that sort of on-premises cloud gap in creating hybrid solutions, and even bring the edge into the picture as needed. So as I was mentioning, the key thing is these automated templates, and as you can see here, they can be incredibly comprehensive, and also we can take individual templates and stitch them together so that they can be composed. And this allows us to go from very, very simple deployment configurations into some that are really quite complex. This is really key to the offering, as we can further customize existing templates. And this is why this really speaks to researchers, is because the research needs of every individual researcher, every group, every project are different. Sometimes they're dramatically different, sometimes they're subtly different. But if you have a templated based approach that you can tweak or completely enhance, extend in various fashions, and you really do have the ability to address the very specific nuances of the research use cases. We find in practice that this is incredibly important, because if you don't give research teams exactly what they require, we're just not going to be able to make use of those platforms. So we take the templates, and in some sense, we hydrate them, we invoke them, if you like, we instantiate them, and that gives us our notion of workspaces. So these are the actual places where the researchers will come to their work. And I will give you some examples of this, so this become a whole lot more concrete. So one of the great advantages of taking an approach like this for research is that we bake into the solution reproducibility and repeatability. So this is very critical. Whatever you're doing, any kind of scientific endeavors. We offer a managed services approach, and I'll give you a bit more of a feel for that as well. Um, and you'll see how this is really, again, how we really try to differentiate the offering in terms of what's delivered to customers. We also bring our expertise into the picture. Stephen talked about some of our unique attributes. I think one of the other places where we're quite unique is we have this blend of expertise in terms of high performance computing, various areas of research science, people who've actually done scientific research, such as myself. But we also have a lot of expertise in AI and various other areas as well. So we can draw all of this together. And that's why we've really a key part of the offering is this notion of a service concierge, where we are able to offer, we're able to work with you as trusted advisors to help you craft the research solutions that really are going to make the most significant impact in terms of enabling your research. We've packaged things up with ManageX into two broad classes of offers, and I will give you a little bit of insight through the demo into each of these. The first is the so-called self-service offer. And as you might expect, this is a software as a service model that offers pre-built, if you like, workspaces that are made available to typically individual researchers, sometimes teams of collaborative researchers working collaboratively. And again, this is really just intended to be a rapid means for onboarding researchers to cloud-enabled solutions. So we, again, it always starts off with consultation in terms of these discovery sessions with the researchers so that we can translate what the requirements of the research are into the most appropriate solutions that are available via Microsoft Azure. And we'll provide access through essentially a web portal. It's incredible how powerful a web portal-based interface can be these days. That's typically what people will use. We'll show you some exceptions to that. The great advantage of this is because we're working with so-called pre-built, if you like, typical common mass market kinds of workspaces. We typically have a bunch of these available in our portfolio, in our catalog, and so we can make these available very, very quickly. So that's the self-service offer. The enterprise offer is much more about a highly customized solution. And so this is where institutions may have requirements around working with, for example, data, and there's a lot of sensitivity with working with that data. So we need to build, for example, a trusted research environment, or perhaps there are various compliance matters that need to be addressed, such as NIST 800-171. So we need to build environments that are appropriate and suitable. So that's another strength of the platform, as we'll demonstrate to you. Again, always about managing the research funds in the most fiscally responsible fashion. So cost management is a key part of the solution that we have that's available as well. And then, of course, being able to support now not just these pre-built configurations, but pretty much anything that you can imagine. So that's more along the lines of the so-called enterprise offer. Okay, let's drill down a little bit now and give you a little bit more context for this. So this is kind of a architectural overview of the kind of thing that we can make available to you in terms of the self-service offer. So the what we're showing here, kind of towards the central left here, is the institution's cloud tenant. We can deploy our solutions via ManageX into a pre-existing tenant, or we can actually set up a tenant for the academic research initiatives. And we done both of these. It really depends upon the nuances of the particular use cases. So what we're showing you here is the fact that indeed we can, as you might expect, we can build we can deliver workspaces based on blueprints that are around CPU based offerings and GPU based offerings. In We can load in containerized images from, for example, the Azure Container Repository. We do quite a lot of work in terms of building custom software images for our academic clients. They see a lot of value in that. All of this can be presented either either via a web-based interface or a so-called thin client, so a remote desktop protocol session for either Windows or Linux-based systems. XDG is another offering that's available for the Linux-based solution. So this is a great way of providing people with access to standalone virtual machines. But it's really important to emphasize that that's not all that we're able to do with this self-service offering. Sometimes what a research team requires is some kind of a shared data storage area. And so we have solutions that are workspaces that can be built around that. The team might want to use this shared area for storing data for their own internal purposes. And quite often, what we find is because you can reference the data that's stored there using such things as Universal Resource Identifier or URI, it's possible that this is a great place to have data to also work with external tools of various kinds. In addition to these offerings around isolated virtual machines and storage empowered solutions, we also have AI oriented solutions. We're seeing, for example, a tremendous amount of interest right now in making use of Azure AI Foundry. And I'll show you a little bit more of this through the case of the demo. Again, through just a web-based interface, it's possible for researchers to gain access to the latest large language models from providers such as OpenAI and various others. And this allows people to start being able to build applications based around large language models, whether that's something that is perhaps agentic in nature, a retrieval augmented generation, chat solution, what have you. Lots of different possibilities there. And finally, but also very importantly, we are able to interface with your identity management solution. And I'm just highlighting a couple of possibilities here. Entra ID, Microsoft Entra ID, and essentially anything that makes use of SAML security assertion markup languages, another possibility there. Okay, so this is all about the kind of workspaces that can be enabled through our self-service offering. We have a lot of potential building blocks that we can tap into. We've already covered some of these in various degrees of details. For example, I've already told you quite a lot about blueprints and templates and the distinction between them. We've indicated that identity management is a strength as well. We've hinted at some of the cost management capabilities. Because we're talking about enabling research, collaboration is another aspect that is absolutely fundamental. We are able to work not only within a single institution, but by making use of a tenant on, for example, the Terawe CSP, cloud service provider, we're able to set up collaborative environments for researchers from different institutions to collaborate and even involve people from the private sector, should that be of interest. I hinted at the fact that we can build automated workflows. We've built various purpose-built workflows. We've built entire genomics pipelines and various other solutions as well using the technology. And again, all of this is offered as a managed solution. So there is a degree of infrastructure. So we can enable a number of different classes of solutions across a variety of different areas. We're able to tap into a variety of different competencies, some of which I've already hinted at in terms of the through this notion of a concierge or service concierge. And we can tap into a variety of different resources. And again, this is really important because research quite often isn't just restricted to on-premises or cloud. It's quite often a combination. We need to work with private clouds. We may need to work with multiple public clouds. We may need to build hybrid configurations that straddle logically in some sense to retrieve the most out of both the on-premises and cloud-based environments. And we may need to actually get out into the edge where Internet of Things devices and other technologies might come into play. So we can tap into these so-called building blocks as needed to craft very bespoke solutions with Terawe ManageX. And here is such an example. Now, I realize there's a lot of complexity here, and I will just try and give you a quick sense of what's going on here. But what we're seeing is a very consistent interest with our global customer base in being able to build some notion of a secure enclave, a trusted research environment, whatever the specifics are. And again, we draw from this pool of building blocks as needed to craft the environment. Now, over here on the right, what you can see is that we need to be able to support a variety of different personas who may have a need to access this environment. So some kind of an operator, perhaps a team or an individual who's charged with managing that very, very sensitive data. Quite often you need these different separate and distinct personas to be in compliance, because process is also an important part of these solutions almost as much as product. And then, of course, you have people who are very concerned about compliance. All of these different personas, including the actual users here, which will typically be researchers, they are able to access this trusted environment, this secure enclave, through a variety of different security mechanisms. We use such things as multi-factor authentication in addition to or in concert with as part of the identity management solution, whether that is based on Entra ID or something else. We provide quite often thin client access, as I was mentioning before, through these remote desktop protocol sessions, which may go to some kind of an intermediate host before they actually get into a so-called vault, principal investigator vault, where the actual workspaces themselves live. So this is kind of external to the enclave. This could be various people that are on within the campus environment, or perhaps working remotely. The secure enclave itself, as you can see here, has some shared services, various kinds of data-oriented services, various kinds of services to support the ManageX infrastructure, such as a library of our blueprints and various interfaces up here at the top within the concept of the parent enclave. So we think of this as being a hub that is kind of, as the name implies, central to the secure enclave. And then on a principal investigator basis, a project basis, whatever makes the most sense, we build out various spokes. Each of these can be thought of then as a vault that is specific to a principal investigator, a particular project. And these vaults typically feature one or more workspaces. And that's what we're trying to show here. We're also showing that in order to make this hardened, if you like, for security compliance purposes, we may make use of such things as network security groups, distributed denial of service attack protection, VPNs, various other measures to ensure that the various compliance requirements are being properly addressed. And of course, again, a high degree of customization is also a feature of this. Okay, let me jump from the slides to a little bit of demo to give you a little bit more of a feel for this. In this first part of the demo, I want to showcase our self-service offering. What I'm showing on screen now is kind of a generic example of that particular offering. You can see that that is indeed the case here. And of course, what we would do is brand this for your particular institution. At the top here, we also include some generic introductory verbiage, a blurb, if you like, that sets the stage for how we are working together, collaborating to offer up these cloud workspaces to your researchers in a self-service fashion. As we move down the screen, you can see that there's an opportunity to also quickly capture some of the major points to attract the attention of your researchers. Not too surprisingly, it's about such things as accelerating research and tapping into some of the unique affinities, if you like, the unique value proposition that the cloud can bring to research. And so we want to highlight that right up here at the outset. Now, because we are researchers ourselves and have engaged in research on an ongoing basis, we recognize that it's really important to be able to offer customized offerings. In other words, workspaces that are highly customized to specific research cases. And in fact, when you look at this section here, which is going to introduce offerings that are currently provided through this particular solution, I'll get to that in a moment. You can see that we baked into the solution the opportunity to customize the workspaces to meet the needs of various researchers. Okay, so what I want to do now is show you just a couple of examples of some fairly standard workspaces that are fairly popular with the research organizations, with the academic institutions that we are already working with. The first one that we have here is basically just blob storage. So blob storage, that's kind of a blob-based means for storing data. And you may not think that this is anything that's particularly exciting, but believe it or not, there are many clients who find this kind of an offering very enabling, whether it be for smaller research teams or for larger teams. Great place to work collaboratively on data, because you can get a URI, or a universal resource identifier for your data. It can also be a great way of providing your data to perhaps some kind of a third-party tool that is needed for further analysis, what have you. So blob storage can actually be quite useful. Quite often clients come to us requesting virtual machines. That may be they require a Linux virtual machine because they don't have access to one, or they don't have access to one easily. We have several clients who've come to us. They're working with applications such as RStudio, and they're getting into more computationally demanding requirements that they need to make of that software. And so they're coming to us with the need for having larger memory footprint virtual machines, alongside perhaps a need for a greater count of virtual processors. So believe it or not, access to VMs of different characteristics is also very, very helpful. Obviously, these days, there remains tremendous interest in working with large language models and trying to do something useful with large language models. On Azure, there is a phenomenal jumping off point referred to as Azure AI Foundry, and it serves as a gateway for doing exactly that kind of thing, working with large language models, building applications around large language models. And I'll give you a little bit of a deeper sense of that as we work through the demo. We're finding a lot of interest in this particular offering, both from researchers, but also for those who are working or wanting to work with large language models in some kind of a teaching related context. The final example that we have here is the Microsoft Copilot Studio. This is a great entry point, particularly for those who prefer more no code or low code kind of options. It's a great gateway to getting into the ability to start start building agentic applications, whether those are standalone agents or in fact possibly crafting some kind of a multi-agent system that is useful. So that's the Copilot Studio offering. And I do want to emphasize that these are just 4 examples from a much larger catalog of possibilities. And what we tend to do is actually work with the institutions to figure out which offerings it makes sense to provide. What typically happens is that researchers onboard to the cloud rapidly using this self-service offering that we've been describing to you, and then realize that they require various customizations in order to really ensure that their research is very productive. So the final thing I'll just show you is give you a little bit of a sense as to how researchers typically get access to the self-service offering. So this is an application form that, of course, can be customized on a per institution basis. Researchers will pick their workspace of particular interest, complete the form, which requires that various points of interest be captured for the purpose of processing the application. And once they are ready to do that, they can go ahead and click on apply. What I want to show you now is the kind of the workflow from the perspective of the user. At the back end, there will be somebody from the academic institution, or indeed somebody from Terawe, who will be charged with approving the applications. So let me just show you what the experience is like from the researcher's perspective. So the first email that the researcher receives back is an indication that their application for a workspace has indeed been received. Once that application is processed, and assuming it gets approved, they will receive an indication that their application has been approved, and further details are going to follow. As the workspace is automatically created, and in most cases this happens in a matter of minutes as opposed to hours or days or longer. But once they've received this, it's really just a short wait for actually getting access to a workspace. Now, we're able to deploy these workspaces into a tenant on Microsoft Azure that within with a subscription that is dedicated to the institution, or we can actually deploy workspaces into a pre-existing tenant. So what I'm showing you here is a invitation to a tenant that is provided for the institution by us at Terawe. Clients often find this is a very appealing way to proceed. It offers very high degrees of flexibility, particularly if researchers want to collaborate with their colleagues who perhaps are part of a different institution even. So we can facilitate that in various ways. So this is all about accepting the invitation to gain access to a tenant where the workspace will be created should that be required. And finally, you get your indication that your workspace is ready. And you can see here, it's very, very simple to get into, for example, a workspace based on Azure AI Foundry. You literally just click this link. And when you do, you're promoted over here to Azure AI Foundry. This is the typical interface for Foundry. You can see I've got various projects on the go here, but really the point to make at this juncture is that you have access to, for example, the latest large language models from providers like OpenAI and various others, both for dealing with text, dealing with more image-based requirements, combined models, what have you. There's a unbelievable array of models that are available to you at the current time. Now, Microsoft has also been a leader in building sort of pre-built AI componentry. And so, for example, you will see accessible via Foundry various pre-built components. This particular one here is all about being able to work easily with videos. There are other tools that allow you to do such things as to extract text from documents, for example. So there are all kinds of capabilities that are pre-built that you can also use Foundry as your jumping off point to start engaging in your research or supporting your teaching. Finally, for this part of the video, for those who prefer more of a deep code experience, we also offer quite typically as one of the pre-built workspaces, virtual machines based around the data science curated image that is offered by Microsoft. And so what you're seeing here is a browser-based interface that allows us to gain access to just a wide variety of software here. You can see, for example, support for various programming languages, support for Azure ML. There is even support for various open source frameworks for machine and deep learning, such as PyTorch and TensorFlow. So it's a great jumping off point, and all of this provided through the very comfortable and for many familiar interface of a Jupyter notebook. So again, there's really quite an array of offerings that range from the low code, no code options right through to code rich options as well. All right, let's move to the second part of the demo. In the second part of the demo, what I want to do is completely change the context and just give you a little bit of a feel for the enterprise offering that we described previously. To set this up, you'll recall from the fairly detailed architecture slide for a secure enclave that implicit in such a configuration is the requirement to support a variety of different personas. So what I'm going to show in this particular part of the demo is I've actually logged in to our ManageX interface using the persona of a compliance manager. So that's what you're seeing over here. Now, what I'm looking at is a pre-deployed illustration of that secure enclave. And when this part of the screen refreshes momentarily here, you'll see that in order to put together such a secure enclave, a lot of pieces are required. Just to highlight a few of these, we have logic apps that are part of the requirement here. We have event grids. We have Azure Data Factory for helping to manage data pipelines and so on, and various other components. You know, even if you have just an isolated virtual machine with all of the support that is required for that virtual machine, there are actually a surprising number of pieces. Now, when it comes to ensuring compliance, and in this particular example, I'm going to show you compliance with respect to NIST 800-171, a particular revision of that, a standard that emphasizes controls that need to be applied to CUI, or controlled unclassified information. There are some more than 100 different controls that need to be applied in a case like that. And so that can get a little bit involved. And you can see here that what we have done is looked at each of the different components that make up that secure enclave that I was describing to you previously, and assessed their status of compliance with respect to NIST 800-171. It's important to acknowledge that compliance is never really a destination. It's always a journey. So it's important that someone such as a compliance officer be able to come back and periodically check that indeed the environments that researchers are making use of are in compliance with whatever the appropriate standards, regulations, etc. are, because the consequences can be quite severe. So that's a critical part of the overall offering. Now we're showing here the offering with respect to NIST 800-171. And as you can see, we are also currently working on offerings relating to other means of regulation, compliance, such as GDPR and HIPAA and so on. So more coming there in that particular context. So this is a little bit of an introduction to what is possible today using the enterprise offering for Terawe ManageX. We do also have offerings that are able to take advantage of the government cloud offerings for the US, and similar kinds of sort of secure offerings for other geographies. And in that case, we would actually offer different measures of compliance against which the solution can be measured. And I just have one more slide that we will go through to try and bring it back together, and then I'm going to hand it back to Stephen. So this slide really tries to encapsulate the value proposition of what we have shared with you. Hopefully, I've given you a bit of a sense of the fact that at Terawe, at Terawe and Microsoft, we acknowledge that many of your research projects have complicated requirements, and you may need to, build various pipelines. You may need to introduce degrees of automation. You may need to span different boundaries, on-premises, cloud, multiple clouds, et cetera, and so on. Your requirements may span from areas of high-performance computing to the latest advances in AI that include, for example, multi-agentic systems. We're able to handle all of that, and also handle the requirements around integrating data within that fashion as well. All of this spanning the variety of different components, from the cloud to on-premises and even out to the edge. I think one of the most important aspects of what we're able to really enable is take your scientific requirements and therefore your needs, and translate that into what's going to work best. And as you've seen, we use a means for crafting automation templates, so-called blueprints, that allow us to deliver solutions in a repeatable and reproducible fashion. And we will align those directly to whatever the specifics of your research, your discipline-specific considerations, fiscal-specific considerations, compliance, regulatory considerations, etc. Security is an innate capability of the platform. We're able to tap into everything that is available on public clouds such as Azure. We can introduce roles-based access controls. We can ensure that you have single sign-on capabilities so that that is not only compliant with your institutional requirements, but also allows you to move around with ease. So, for example, in many cases, what people can expect is that their Entra ID that they're using to get access to their campus resources will also give them access to these additional um, research-related resources. So we're able to really come, you know, be completely frank in terms of being able to support highly collaborative research, even if that research requires uh, institutional boundaries, boundaries between the public and private sector, be crossed, transected in appropriate and meaningful ways. Researchers are very, very concerned with being fiscally responsible. They have to align their budgetary spends with the fiscal realities of their grants, and so we're able to appropriately do that by providing most appropriate places for them to do their research, their, if you like, their landing zones, their environments on the cloud that are customized to incorporate some of these considerations. Because we're offering up the economies of this approach, a managed services approach, a templating based approach, the way in which this solution is delivered is actually optimized, both in terms of overhead and in terms of fiscal implications as well. And again, because we understand that visibility into what's actually happening on when use of the cloud is being made, we're able to provide reporting and alignment with whatever the funding landscape happens to be. So, bottom line, simply stated, we really are able to demonstrate that we're able to make research infrastructure work. It's meaning that this is usable by researchers. They get to focus on their research, not IT, fundable by their the grants, and when it necessary, also very, very scalable. And with that, I'll pass it back to Stephen.
Thank you, Ian. And as you see there, from Ian's demo, there's a comprehensive set of features that we're offering to you, but it really doesn't matter what we think. What we much prefer to do is let our customers speak for us. And I'm just going to give you two case studies, two references cases here today, because they had faced very, very different challenges and came to us and came to ManageX to address each of those. And the first was with Louisiana State University. And their core challenge was really about getting instant access, allowing researchers to get immediately into a situation with access to the technologies that allowed them to accelerate research. And with the case of LSU, they turned to Terawe's ManageX platform with the self-service cloud platform model. What they wanted to do is to be able to provide cloud provisioning processes to those researchers, which were both instant and also scalable. And at the back of that, obviously cost efficient. So with ManageX, what you see from the statistics there, cloud access time is now improved by over 80%. Research onboarding is now something that happens in minutes rather than days. There's much less drain upon central IT services and support. But at the back of that, there's also robust and careful alignment with LSU's existing IT governance policies. So enabling research quickly, absolutely important. Making sure that there's core visibility of privacy laws and everything is compliant all the way through is just as important as cost management. A second case study I'll mention is with Yale University School of Medicine. In this instance, a slightly different challenge. What they were trying to do is to enable a truly collaborative research environment. And what they've been doing, is focusing on efficacy from organ transplants. It may surprise you to know that roughly 27% of donated organs are never able to be used. And they were looking at different ways in which they could improve improve the outcomes and the usability of donated organs. Obviously, this is something that directly affects people's lives and in many cases can save lives. So in pursuit of that, they were working with universities right across the globe, including universities who were core partners in the UK. And they turned in this instance to ManageX as a way of allowing them to accelerate that process, but also to support effective collaboration across researchers and across different projects. At the back of that, huge amounts of complexity, but again, removing that complexity from the researchers themselves and managing that effectively with what we would term a white glove service. Because at the back of this is what we call our research concierge service. With everybody we deal with as customers, we always start off with a research computing support so that we do discovery workshops, build out solutions with them, and do cost modeling upfront. The other side of that is we have deep technology expertise that we can bring to bear. We can ensure that they have access to the latest and greatest technologies, and we have the expertise and to support them through the process as they engage in research. Beyond that, there's also a range of other on-demand consulting services if they wish to use them. Everybody from architects to data scientists to analysts and developers. And beyond that, again, we have a range of other services should people want them or should they be, something that can augment the work they're doing. And really core to everything we're doing is cost control and management. We recognize that the biggest concern for most research organizations is the fear of costs running away with them in a cloud environment. So we provide a whole set of different costing levels with ManageX itself. We ensure that there's accurate and transparent chargeback and invoicing. So even when there is complex organizational cost levels and chargebacks between departments, different project codes that have to be adhered to, etc., we can help with that process and policy management to make sure that it's visible and is not an encumbrance as people move forward with research. We also have the ability for organizations to both price and mark up ManageX service layers so they can do a custom usage scenario based on their own specific research project. And at the back of that, we have such confidence in the ability of these tools to provide real cost management and cost control that we offer a zero overage guarantee. In other words, once we set a specific financial threshold, we guarantee that it will not be exceeded. If it is, we pick up the cost. So beyond all of those controls, we also have an offering called ManageX Academy. And ManageX Academy is there to help organizations roll out cloud and AI services to all users across the campus and increasing the knowledge set, no matter what your need is. This is, as the slide says, a user-centric, self-service, institution-branded portal, a learning portal, which enables an automated approval process. So we have specialized offers within this for things like OpenAI, Azure AI Foundry, and Copilot, but we can also provide on-demand cloud environments and labs. So whether you're looking at this as a service to support things like hackathons or cloud and AI training across the campus, our ManageX Academy can provide you with those services. So what we would like you to think of us is very much your future-proof partner, because in addition to our expertise in current technologies, we are a forward-looking a partner. It might surprise you to know that Terawe actually wrote the global sales playbook for Microsoft for mixed reality. Before that, for cognitive services. That we are a partner who was always focused on the next generation, on what's coming down next. Everything from LLM and multi-agent research blueprints. We're already developing those. As Ian said earlier, we have a major focus on sustainability, making sure that we're helping to enhance and support those sustainability goals within institutions. We're at an early stage with Azure quantum integration, and always we are adherents to the principles of responsible AI. So for us, this is something that really underpins everything we do. And at the back of that, the recognition that we can offer a tailored solution. ManageX is modular, it's infra agnostic, and it's designed to scale. So what's the next step? What we would say is, let's start just by seeing what's possible. Reach out and book a one-to-one discovery session. What we'll do then is we'll go through your research infrastructure needs. We can provide a live demo to whoever you wish us to show it to, so we can really show how ManageX works within the context of your department or your funding requirements. And work with us. We are a collaborative and partner. We're already involved in a number of consortia and grant proposals where we're supporting universities and research organizations applying for grants, running in most cases into significant levels of funding. We love to do those collaborations, at a technology level as well. And we also want to help support that through the ManageX Academy. The first step, what we'd say, is just reach out to us. Use the research@terawe.com email address that you see on screen. Let's have a conversation. Let's see what we can do to help you accelerate research, more effectively control costs, and really help the technologies, the Microsoft technologies at the heart of this, that advance research and advance results. So with that, what I would say is thank you for your time. It's been obviously a pleasure and an honor for myself and Ian to have the chance to talk to you. Do reach out to us using that email address, and we're very much looking forward to having the first of what we hope will be many conversations.
Thanks, Stephen and Ian, and thank you for attending this episode of the Microsoft Academic Research Exchange. We hope you found the presentation insightful, and you'll join us for the next webinar, which we will promote on the Microsoft Azure for Academic Research LinkedIn community. Please join that LinkedIn community to follow this exciting series, and thank you again.